It is my hope this morning that each of you who are sitting in the pew have a colored piece of paper and a pencil. I know that some of us are the artsy, creative type, and just sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning can get a little bit boring. Listening to other people who are talking, particularly the pastor, right? So this morning, we are going to engage in a process to think about what these texts mean for us today. Now, as I was talking with one person earlier this week, and some of the instances that are happening in their life, in the church, in the community, I was reminded of a poem by Maya Angelou. This incredible poet, and I would also say theologian, who invites us to think beyond ourselves, to think in metaphor and wonder. However, oftentimes in the church, we tend not to like metaphor. We want things that we can grasp onto and tell people exactly what it means. But that's not the story for today. The story today is about poetry and metaphor and wonder. And this Psalm 23 that we are so accustomed to hearing at funerals or after Easter on Good Shepherd Sunday invites us into thinking in the metaphor, in what it means to look to the holy. Now let's take a moment here with this Psalm 23. As I mentioned, I grew up with sheep, at least for several years. And I was a shepherd, though by most accounts, at least in the ancient world, I would have been a pretty poor shepherd. You see, I wasn't with the sheep 24 hours a day. I went to school, and I checked on them before school and after school, and then at night, and if it was lambing season, throughout the night. But I wasn't there all the time. And I didn't have to worry about them grazing in the open grassland. We had nice little pastures, all set up, ready for the sheep, for their grazing and making sure they had food and water readily accessible. I didn't have to go and find it or make sure that they were all kept close together in that one flock. Now, for me, as someone who has had some shepherding experience, though limited by ancient standards, the metaphor today makes some sense. But for those who are even one or two or more steps removed from farms and agriculture and sheep, does this metaphor really make sense? Do we get the sense of the hard work that it takes to be the shepherd? Or what it's like to deal with a bunch of sheep scattered over the grassland, or the challenges of making sure that they have food and water? So your commitment today is to take this piece of paper, and as we talk about poetry and metaphor, to think in your own life, how would you, in what metaphor would you define God or the holy? That's the first piece. How would you give a label or a meaning to God? Is it the computer programmer who works 24/7 to come up with the ideas or the creativity? Is it the hard-working God? Is it the parent God who is on 24/7 as a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, or as some people like to call it, a domestic engineer? Or is God the loving grandparent? Rack your brain for a moment and think of what metaphor today really works for you with God. And I'm going to keep talking, but invite you to write that down as you think about that. Because the next piece that we come to in Psalm 23 is beyond the metaphor of the Good Shepherd. It's It's taking that as an entrance point, but then it's saying, there are times that life is hard or doesn't make sense. And I think about some of the folks today who are our theologians, our poets, and I invite you to hear some of those words that are being lifted up. This one does come from one of my favorites, Maya Angelou, and she writes this poem called Savior. She says, petulant priests, greedy centurions, and 1,000,000 incense gestures stand between your love and me. Your agape sacrifice is reduced to colored glass, to vapid penance, and the tedium of ritual. Your footprints yet mark the crest of billowing seas, but your joy fades upon the tablets of ordained prophets. Visit us again, Savior. Your children, burdened with disbelief, blinded by a patina of wisdom, corrode down this veil of fear. We cry for you, although we have lost your name. This woman, lifting up the questions, the struggles of the people, feeling at times removed from this one who is the life giver, this one she looks to and longs to know as Savior. But questioning the struggles of our day, the disbelief, the ways that at times church seems empty, meaningless. Or the ways that the church captures perhaps a piece of history, but doesn't always make it come alive. What are the problems, the challenges that we see going on around us? Those places where perhaps we long to know, to wonder, to think about the holy. And then, how do we capture that challenge? Whether it is disbelief, or feeling weighed down by our own ineptitude or our own greatness, our own ego. Whether it's the poverty in society, the addictions, the struggles. How do we bring that into our poem? How do we wonder together about what that means? You see, when we get to Psalm 23, there's this incredible image. After hearing that the Lord is my shepherd, that I shall not have or shall not be in want, that there is this one who leads us beside still waters, who restores our souls. But then comes this clincher. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. There's a problem. There's a problem looming for this poet, this psalmist. Perhaps it's very real and immediate in watching the enemies, the soldiers, gather around the valley. Perhaps it's the famine or the fatigue that this person feels in their daily walk or living. Perhaps it is the challenge of knowing that there is disease in the family. Leprosy. Someone who is failing at their health. Perhaps it's the loss of a loved